very glad that you are all uh, with us today this afternoon. So before I get started into the actual webinar, I do want to spend just a few minutes of your valuable time to go over a little bit on the CalPro, the Moodle course that we're going to be doing the work in. So when you log in, you will see our main page, and then here you would see each week. So for example, right now we are in week 1. So then here is where you will be posting for example, the introduction. Right now you're doing the webinar. So every time you finish an activity, you will see the little check mark kind of up here. Here we also have, if you see these little, I call it the chat icons. I like to be, use simpler terms even with my students. You see the little chat icon here. That means that is where there's a discussion board. So you notice that this week there's reading A, and then the discussion for reading A, instructions on the podcast, and then the discussion questions. So here is where you will be putting in all your discussion items. Next week, when we start week 2, then that's when you'll start seeing more similar things like this. So make sure that you please post your assignments in the correct area. That way it will make it easier when it comes time to make sure that you've completed all your work, that we know you've done the work, but if you put it in the wrong spot, sometimes it'll be a little bit harder to go ahead and correct that. So again, if any help that you need, please feel free to outreach Vicky, myself, or also Katie, and we'll be more than glad to assist you. Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our session. So the objectives for this webinar is to develop a community of online colleagues. And I'm going to be very honest, I think I've seen that. I haven't seen this type of engagement in a while with courses that I do, where people are recognizing each other and are greeting each other, and maybe you've worked together in previous places. So I think with this class here, it's not going to be a problem for us to develop that community of online colleagues. Understand how this online course works, and explore instructor and student roles in a multi-level class. Now, I do know right now we are all under different circumstances. Some of us are still remote, some of you are hybrid, some of you are in person, some of you are only going to be 100% online. So a lot of these activities, we can customize and modify them to fit our learning environment that we've experienced pretty much this year. So the first thing is we want to define multi-level. So in the chat box, in one word, popcorn style, you could just throw in a few words. What is a characteristic of a designated multi-level ESL class? And I've seen a lot in the discussion boards where people really elaborate on this. But in a few words, or 1 or 2 words, few words, go ahead and in the chat box, if you can write, what is a characteristic of a designated multi-level ESL class? Okay, so I'll give you about a minute. Set my okay, oops, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and check the chat. Spinning plates, busy, varying language levels, various levels of ESL. I like that, the spinning plates, yeah. Various abilities, yes. Variety of skills. Diversity, yes, diversity as well. But I think, just to reference what one of our colleagues posted in one of the discussions, where multi-level, they need a lot of support, where in a multi-level class, even if we're in a designated level class, we still have multi-levels within that level. I teach advanced, so I have from advanced low all the way to advanced high, and that's a single class. Organized, okay. Family, very good. Okay, so yes, and I like the concept of family, because even in our program here, that's what we use a lot, that concept of family. We're all a family, we're all here to learn and to support each other. And just like in a family, we all have different variety of level of skills. So, and we all help each other. So I think that's very important when we have a multi-level class, especially I feel at the beginning level, it's where our students need more of that support. Okay. The purpose of the course is to present strategies for planning lessons for students, in a variety of language skills and to engage each student in learning. And I know it could be very difficult. Sometimes it's easier said than done, but with the strategies that we'll be learning about in the next couple of weeks, you will be able to do this again, either in a virtual setting, but more ideally an in-person setting whenever your program goes back in person. And the key word here is to engage the students so that one group of students doesn't feel left out and the other group feels that they're only getting instruction. That's what we want to avoid, because that's when we see that our retention falls. If teacher focuses just on one group and not on another one, then that's what we want to address here in this course, is that way we plan our lessons to make sure we capture the student from the beginning low to the advanced level. Also, with the course objectives is to identify characteristics that distinguish a multi-level class from a single level class. And I think, going back to what I mentioned earlier, even in a single level class, we still have a variety of levels. So even though it's single, doesn't mean it's not a multi-level class, but we're going to learn the differences between one and the other. Identify and practice developing activities for whole group, likability, and crossability. And again, in reading the discussions, a lot of people did make those comments where having people work in groups is one way where you could help each other. But even within that, working with groups, there's always going to be the person who's always going to want to take the lead, and then the person who's very passive. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to make sure that everyone in a group has an active role in participating in the class. Also, to match appropriate grouping strategies with the 6 stages of a lesson in the upcoming weeks. And we will develop a lesson for a multi-level ESL class. So I know a lot of us already have probably lessons that we've done in the past, or based on the curriculum that you're currently using or you have used, you will see a lot of lessons like that. But in this course, we want you to create one or modify one that you've already done. Identifying resources for managing and teaching a multi-level class. And one of the biggest resources that I always like to point out is each other. We learn a lot from each other. We have a variety of colleagues in this course that range from CDCR to incarcerated in county jails, some community college, adult schools, I believe even CBO. So we have the whole spectrum of different types of programs that we have. And I think that's going to be a great asset in this course, that we'll hear from the teachers in the K-12 ESL programs and the teachers from the community college, people from CDCR, or other people who work in other jail programs as well. So I think that's going to be a great resource that we will all have. And oops. And also develop solutions to challenges presented by a multi-level class. And just to reiterate, especially now with having most of us on Zoom or the platform that you use, having that, it's just an added layer of challenges that are presented in a multi-level class. So we'll be addressing that as well. So we do have a poll that, I'm sorry, I have 2 monitors going on. So sometimes this one seems to be a little bit better for me to look at. So you might see me looking that way. Have you taken a CalPro online course before? So the chat poll open, it's a simple yes, no. So have you taken an online course before? Okay, so we have about a few seconds. 76% of the people have voted, so we're still waiting for a couple of people. Okay, so it looks like most of us, this would be the first time taking a, oh, wait a minute. So most of you have taken a course before in CalPro, very good. A couple of people are new. So for those of you who are new, welcome. And I hope you find this experience easy to navigate. And in the future, you could go ahead and do some More. So yeah, Susan says that not a course, but many workshops and sessions. Very good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And okay, so very good. Okay. We're also going to read and contribute to asynchronous online discussions at least twice a week. And again, I've noticed, from Sunday till now, our group is very good at communicating online. So a minimum of at least twice a week, the more the better. And then again, that's where we get our ideas and a lot of the content for this course. Read the course materials, watch the videos, and listen to the podcast. So that's something that we'll be doing a little bit later on in the weeks, is where there's going to be videos, there's going to be podcasts, and then you do want to watch them. Some of them are 2-part videos, and they're not very long, about 10 minutes or so, but yet they're very, very informative for all of us in the multi-level class. And also complete the assignments, including the discussion boards, and then your main assignment would be the lesson that we'll be creating in week 4. Okay. So the week, when we talk about the week in our course, the week is Monday through Sunday. Monday beginning of the week, Sunday is the end of the week to submit any work. I do suggest, and if I know it's really hard to sometimes to do, because you want to do the course on the weekend, but if you could submit your work by Friday, then you'll have 2 days to respond to your colleagues and for them to respond to you. So that way, if you do your initial discussion post, let's say during the week, people will have, maybe the weekend to respond to you, because that is part of the assignments, is to respond to participants' posts. So we do want to have a little bit of cushion space. That way you could go back and also respond to your colleagues' posts. And again, the discussions and the responses are excellent. Okay. In week 1, one of the main assignments in week 1, besides the introduction and also the needs survey, is going to be the background reading A. So on that one, again, if you recall back when I showed you the Moodle course, they're kind of like in sequenced order. So background reading A, and then there's going to be a discussion. With this one here, it is titled, "What is an ESL multi-level class? Building class community and involving students in a classroom management." So you're going to be reading about that and also planning a multi-level lesson. So it's a couple pages, can't recall exactly, but it's about 4 or 5 page document with a lot of wealth of information that will help you, especially building a class community. Even some of my colleagues, they're like, wait a minute, some of these strategies that we learned that we would do in person, we can now do them in a virtual setting. So that's the whole purpose, where you could just customize it to however you are delivering your instruction. We'll be learning about the lesson plan format, the WIPEA model, which is a warm-up, review, introduction, the presentation, practice, evaluation, and application. So some of us have used this model in the past. There's a question in the chat box. Yeah, are we supposed to respond to the questions listed in blue? I'm not quite sure what you mean, Caitlin, but if you could send me an email. Those would be links. I could.
Actually, I think they're just guiding questions.
Okay. I'm working on a laptop, so my real estate space is kind of small. That's why I have this other monitor. But so yeah, if there are guiding questions. So yes, I believe yes, there are guiding questions. Okay. But again, if you have any question, just feel free to send me an email. Oops. Okay, we'll also be learning about the backwards lesson design. I have to be very honest, when I first was introduced to this concept, it really was like, how am I going to do a lesson backwards? But having learned the concept and having practiced it for many years now, I'm like, wait a minute, we've been doing this all along. It just, we didn't have a term for it. So when we're talking about backward design lesson, we're talking where we want to identify the desired result first. Then we're going to determine the acceptable evidence. How are we going to evaluate that the student will learn what the end product result would be? And then we would plan learning experience and instruction. So for a lot of us, I know, especially coming from the K-12, elementary, middle school, sometimes this concept might be fairly new, but I know like at the high school level, they do this a lot, especially in grade level meetings, where they want to identify, well, what is the outcome going to be? And then what is the acceptable evidence? Is it going to be a quiz? Is it going to be a project? Is it going to be reflection or something like that? And then the teacher plans the learning experience and the instruction. That's when you would use either the curriculum that you have or any other resources that you have. In the virtual workroom for the multi-level ESL instructors, we have, you might recognize the name, Jamie Addleston Goldstein. So in some of the videos, in the videos and the podcast, she will be talking to us about and showing us about different models of instruction. Podcast number 1 is titled, and it kind of goes back to our initial question of how do you describe ESL, a multi-level ESL class. The podcast is titled All the Madness, All the Magic, because honestly, that's what it is. It's what I call controlled chaos. I mean, you have a class of 20 students and each person is a different level, and you have one teacher and you might have 20 languages. So it is that madness at first, but then once you start working, you see the magic, you just see the student bloom. And that's when the magic really happens. But getting between there and there sometimes seems a little bit challenging for us instructors. So we'll be, this podcast is great where it's going to be talking about exactly this. The second podcast is objectives and levels and content. Oh my. Because again, when we plan our lessons, we always want to have our clear objectives. We want to have our content, and we want the content to represent the different levels of ESL. So in this podcast, you will be learning about how to create objectives that will go across all the levels of ESL instruction. Let me just check the chat box really quick. Okay, very good. In week 2, we're going to be watching a video of a demonstration of an ESL multi-level class. So again, you know, it's a great video to watch. Some of us might be fortunate to have a model similar to what we will see, but some of us won't. I'm talking about the paraprofessional, but in the class, in the video, you'll be able to see how a live ESL class is run in a using a paraprofessional, using different types of grouping skills with the students. So the beginning viewing of the video will be by, so begin viewing the video by Thursday, the 22nd. So CalPro can help with any problems before the weekend. So next week, I believe would be the 22nd, yes. You can start watching this video. That way, if you have any trouble, any issues, you could let us know Friday. That way we could address it by the weekend so people could watch it. Again, any questions, you could just feel free to email us. In week 3, so right now I'm just doing a week overview of everything. So in week 3, we're going to do background reading B, which is talking about the grouping strategies. This was a game changer for me. When I learned about this back maybe like 8-9 years ago, it really changed the way how I was teaching my class and how I was working with my students with the different types of grouping skills like the whole group, likability, and crossability. It really, really was a game changer for me. Selecting materials, we'll be learning about selecting materials. And in the virtual workroom for the multi-level ESL classroom, again with Jamie Addleston Goldstein, I'm sorry. We'll be doing that with the podcast, The Art of Orchestrating a Multi-Level Class, because again, going back, we go do that and we do this whole orchestra, looks like session with our students where we're doing one thing and another and teaching this and teaching that. So it's like an orchestra. So in this podcast, she will be discussing all this with us. Okay. Podcast number 4 would be group work that works. Okay, so in this one, especially with, and I know that might pose a little challenging now if we were to go back in person. It's like we don't want to do so much group work, but we can definitely pick a lot of ideas and do the group work like I do with my class in breakout rooms. So we still do this same with my students, the different types of grouping strategies that I do, and then working together in groups. They could still do it in a virtual environment, but it's still using the same concept that I learned in this podcast where grouping that works. Because many times we just group the students randomly. Okay, 1, 2, 3, all the ones here, all the twos here, all the threes here. That's the most easiest to do. But remember, with our ESL students, we want to make sure that they're in there and that they're getting a bang for their buck, so for this, so to say. So we want to make sure that we are grouping them in a way where they will learn from each other and in a way where you will be able to target the students who have a bigger need. Podcast 5 is the second part of that one, Group Works That Works, part 2. So that one would be 2 different podcasts that you will be listening to. And again, it's talking about the same way on how to group your students. On week 3, you will begin developing a single multi-level lesson plan with differentiated objectives and learning activities. And that one would be due on Sunday, May the 2nd. So at this point on week 3, you will start developing your lesson and you will have the differentiated objectives for each level. And again, by then you'll have all the resources and tools to start creating this. Week 4, we will start giving feedback to our colleagues based on the lessons. We would reflect, provide solutions to address challenges facing multi-level instructors. And not only that, but like I say, if we're still working in a virtual environment, that's another added challenge. We would also explore resources for multi-level instructors. And every year when I do this course, well, sometimes I do it twice a year, this is where I really get a lot of good information, because it's resources that you might be using at your agency that I'm not aware of, and vice versa. And this is where we could really, really learn from each other and what resources to use in our classrooms. Any questions about the course content so far? You could go ahead and put it in the chat box. Give you about a minute. Let me open up my chat box. Okay.
Francisco, this is Vicky. I actually have one question. There's one person who has joined via their iPhone. If you could be so kind as to put your name in the chat, that way we can make sure it can count your attendance.
Thank you, Vicky. Okay, so building a class community. So Jamie Addleston Goldstein says a multi-level classroom can be a learning community like no other. And it's absolutely true. So in the chat box, what we're going to do now, what is one way to build class community or group identity among your students? So think about different ways how maybe in the past, or maybe even now virtually, way you build class community or group identity among your students. So I'll give you about a minute or so. Let me open up my chat. Facilitate activities, give students responsibilities and groups, facilitate activities where students share about themselves and their lives, and also the teacher. Class was welcome a discussion about the weekend, family, icebreaker games. Yes, I do a lot of icebreaker games. Share information about your country, students on emergency procedures that gets them sharing. Okay, celebrations. Yes, yes. For us, that has been a big one, or in the past, that has been a big one. Celebrations. Ask a more advanced student to be a leader in a breakout room. Okay, so in a virtual setting, yes. US holidays is also a good way, exactly. Let's see, allowing students the opportunity to help each other, students working together on projects, very good. And again, with us, what has really worked, well, we start usually in August, so in September, Mexican Independence Day. So we have like what we used to have like a celebration on that. And then we would start also, we had a multicultural fair towards the end of the year where students from, well, maybe it's Latin American and some Middle Eastern countries, we would have like a celebration, just like they said, talk about their country, their food, things like that, sharing information about yourself, and also the teacher sharing information about themselves. That's what I really think builds communities, where I always, introduce myself and let them know, I was a student here in Soledad. Growing up, I went to this school, and this school, and I come from a background of parents worked in agriculture. So I know most of my students, they work in agriculture. So I know the struggles of what it is to work in agriculture. I haven't yet experienced myself. And so making those connections, finding ways to connect with your students is a great way to build community, but also to keep retention. So I noticed that once our staff started doing similar things like that, our retention was about 80%. So we were very proud of that. Make lessons relatable to the students. Yes, and I think what Manuel says, it's very, very important, is to make our lessons that are real world experience, because they're adults. And for many years, I mean, at the beginning, I'm going to admit, when I started teaching ESL back in 2004, I was using it because I was coming directly out of the elementary setting. So I was using a lot of the same material that I was using with my third grade students. So for about a whole year, I was doing that. And then I noticed, I'm like, wait a minute, these are adults. My adults don't want to learn about the happy caterpillar. They want to know about how I could communicate effectively in a bank, in a supermarket, or if I have a problem with my insurance. So making that a real world experience, I think that's very, very valuable for our students. The learner's role. So this is by Jill Bell, teaching multi-level classes in ESL. Students in a multi-level class cannot be given the luxury of sitting back quietly and letting the teacher carry the burden of responsibility. For many years, that's how it's like, I'm the teacher, you're the student, I'm gonna teach you, you're gonna listen, you're gonna, get all that information in. But it's we also have to make our students accountable for their own learning. And I think now in a virtual setting, I think that has really sunken in with them, that they're accountable of their own instruction. So the learners take responsibility for their own learning, and individual and collective. So I mean, especially in person, it was a little bit easier. The students might, slack a little bit, but now virtually, because they know that we're only connecting from this time to this time, a few days a week, it's like they have to be more responsible. And if they're absent, it's not like they could get the worksheet from me. It's now by email. It's now do this, and now it's scan this or take a picture of that. So the student learns to be more responsible. And it's also one of the skills that I also talk about. It's like, if this was a job, these are things that you have to do in your job as well. So in the chat box, give an example of what learners can do to take responsibility for their own learning. And I saw a couple of responses in previous chats that can relate to this. Setting goals. Yes, that's the very first thing that we do, setting SMART goals. Yes, and setting SMART goals. Those of you who might be involved, next week we have to do that for our agency. Actively participate in class activities, identifying goals, come to class, treat it like a job. Yes, and that's what Annette says. And just to piggyback on that, I treat my class like a job. When the student comes in, I have a little time clock. It doesn't work now, but and so I'd be like, okay, when you come to an actual job, you might still clock in, or now the new is, with their phone, they're able to clock in. Now they actually clock in with our attendance system. They use their badge and they scan it, so I know exactly at what time they come in and at what time they leave. come to school as often as possible. And just like a job, you know, treat everybody with respect. Also your dress attire, that also, you know, just like a job. And I think that's one thing that with an adult learner, it's like if we treat it like a job, they know the responsibilities of the job: active participation, preparation, and set aside study time. So learning those soft skills of time management and all these things really does go a long way. And those are things that we would be teaching in the classroom that they could transfer into their daily lives. Okay? So the teacher of a multi-level class has to be prepared to let go of the notion that the teacher is the provider of all good things. And again, I was coming straight out of teaching elementary. So in elementary, it's like, I'm in charge, I'm the teacher, you're the student, I'm the know-it-all, and I'm teaching you everything. But with adult learners, it's not like this, because at any level that they come in, the student is coming in with knowledge, either life experience or, you know, education or whatnot, but they're coming in with experience, and we want to validate what they already know. So many times it has to be that the teacher is no longer the teacher. I'm no longer the teacher, I'm more of the facilitator who kind of stands on the side, gives them the tools that are needed so that they could be in charge of their education. And I'm more of a facilitator than of the teacher. So that has worked really well, because it has empowered the students to know that, hey, and one of the quotes that I always have on the board, and I copied it from a colleague of mine, it's an unknown author, but it says, I am a teacher, but I am also a student. I am a student, but I am also a teacher. And I always have that written on the board, because it's letting them know that they're here to learn, but at the same time, I'm always learning, we're always learning constantly. So we're all students and we're all teachers. And the students really like that, that quote, because it validates what is saying here on this slide. So on the instructor's role, we have the guide on the side versus the sage on the stage. And if you're coming from elementary, I mean, we kind of love to be the sage on the stage, but in adult ed, we like to guide on the side. So what do we mean by that? So give an example of what a guide on the side style instructor does. So let me open up my chat. Practice outside of class, a facilitator for a common goal. Ask students, ask what students need to know, okay? You're there to assist in their learning, not, not to force feed it, yes, Gloria? Do a lot of observations of it, yes, doing a lot of observations. Keep the group focused, guide on the side, let the students lead, yeah. So just like Annette says, yes. And that's exactly what our well, at least, you know, for in our agency, that's what the goal is for the students. And I remember somebody in the introduction stated that they're working for in incarcerated setting where they are teaching inmates to teach others. So that's exactly something like this, where the students are leading the instruction. Allow students to lead the discussions. Yes, yes, that they will really pick up a lot of good conversation skills on that. So yes, the guide on the side, it doesn't mean that the teacher is just going to go sit on the side and be in their phone checking social media or emails. No, it means that you're going to be, like it said here in one of the comments, is to monitoring and observing and stepping in when you see that the group is stuck. Let the students take the lead, because ultimately we want them to be responsible for their education as well. And then it's one of those things, like I also tie everything with a job. It's like your boss, your supervisor is not going to be telling you 24 or during the workday, minute by minute, what to do. They're going to go do this. They're going to be on the side. They're going to be assisting other people. You have to know, have that ability to be able to prioritize the work that you're going to do, and keeping up with the time and everything. So that's what we mean when we talk about guide on the side, where you give the instruction. But if your class is 2 hours, you're not going to talk like me for 2 hours. Hope not. I've learned to tone it down to like little chunks of 20 minutes, and then I let them do a group activity to just to reinforce that they understood what I was teaching. Ideas for a multi-level class. So by Leonor Barrio. So a good student should, a good teacher should. So this would be one of the guiding questions that we always want to make sure that we have, is that what should a good student, how should a good student look academically, and how should a good teacher look? So ground rule, so become ground rules. So we will and the teacher will. So this is one of the things that I do have, because we do have to have some type of rules, but I don't make them rules like don't do this, don't do that, or raise your hand for this. No. So I usually put rules for myself. For example, the teacher will start on time and end on time. The teacher will have the lesson prepared at 8 o'clock or whenever your class starts. And then for the student, what would be the ground rule for the student? So then this is when I let my students chime in and be, for example, some of the most common ones is that we will ask questions, which is ironically because a couple of years ago that was the very last thing that they would say, but just recently that's one of the things that is now a priority for them is I will ask questions, I will participate actively. So now we're at the point where the student knows that they're in charge of their education. But when I first did this, students would give me basic responses like we will listen to the teacher, we will not use our cell phone. So you want to make sure that you move those ground rules a little bit more to not just be something about keeping the class in order, but something that the student will do for them to become a better learner. Oh, is this a, oh, so the objectives of the webinar, give me 1 second. Vicky, is this the correct order of the slides or did
Yes. No,
Okay.
no, you got it.
Okay, so sorry about that. I'm working on a new computer, so and it's a Mac. I'm used to PC, so sometimes it just kind of goes all over the place for me. So the webinar objectives were to develop a community of online colleagues, understand how this online course works, explore instructors and student roles in multi-level class. So the second poll, were these objectives met today? Be honest, please. We always say as students, the students always want to please the teacher and they always be like, oh yes, teacher, yes. And like, no, you have to be honest because that will help me become a better teacher, and it will also help you become a better critical thinker and to say like, oh, the teacher really did a good job, or the teacher, needs to improve on this and that. So, and that's why we do evaluations as well. Okay. So I think everybody, yep, 100% have voted. Well, thank you for that response. And again, let me just end the poll here. Okay. So in the chat, we'll have about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. So what was the most helpful in this webinar? Okay. So give you a couple of minutes for this. So maybe about 2, 3 minutes. So let's go ahead and open up the chat. Allow student, okay. Okay, so the okay. Yeah, and I think like Lisa says, validating that teaching children is much different than teaching adults. And I know a lot of us, I know a lot of colleagues of us have both. They teach elementary and then they also have adult. And sometimes it's easier. I'm not just gonna teach whatever I taught my kids in the morning, but we have to remember that with adults, they're coming in with different needs. They're coming in with, I want to learn English so I could get a better job, or I want to learn English because I want to enroll in a community college, or I want to enroll in a career technical ed program. So I think that if anything from this course, we want to make sure, and the lesson plan is really going to guide us on this one, is making sure that we're doing a lesson that is for adults, even young adults. I mean, young adults 18 and over that we might be getting in our program, their goals are also get a job or get a better job or go to career technical ed training or so forth. Okay, so let's see, what else do I have? Everyone's input, seeing the assignments, going over the class expectations, sharing the course expectations, going through the weekly assignment and expectations, an overview and structure explanation. Okay, I have a clear sense of the course content. Glad that you're excited, Maggie. Overview of the course, allow students to, okay, very good. Let's see here. So the next steps. So again, week 1, you will complete all activities by Sunday, April 18th. And I'll go back for those of you who entered a little bit after when I showed the Moodle information. I have a couple minutes. I'll go ahead and show you those again. Week 2, you will begin activities Monday, April 19th. No, it's hard to believe, but it's already April 19th. And then we still have open the poll for webinar 2, where you have options to select the dates, right, Vicki? I think we talked about having it open till...
That's correct. So I'll leave the webinar 2 date and time poll open until Friday, just to allow the opportunity for more participants to vote. And so on Friday it will be closed, and the webinar 2 date and time will be determined then, and I'll post it in the announcements.
Okay.
So it will be sometime, oh, I'm sorry. It will be sometime during week 3. We're just not exactly sure what the date and time is yet. So.
Okay. And let me see here if I could. Oh. Okay, so let me go back to my oh, I don't know what I did now. Okay, give me 1 second. I just want to go back into the Moodle course for those of you uh-oh. I had it ready, but we don't know how that goes. There we go. Okay. Vicki, is my screen up in the CalPro Moodle?
It is. There we go. Yep. Now we can see the course.
Okay. Okay. Sorry again with my Mac. It's sometimes. Okay, so again, for those of you who came in a little bit later, here is where Vicki was talking about for the activities. For example, you have the needs survey, and then there's also the webinar 2 date and time poll. So you have until this Friday to complete this poll. That way we know when our second webinar would be, and it will be in week 3. We just once everybody does the poll, we'll know exactly when. Also, the assignments for this week is, of course, the introduce yourself, where you introduce yourself. If you posted your introduction elsewhere, for example, in here, you could just simply copy it and paste it into the introduction. That way, you know, your introduction is actually here and not in the other site. I don't, you know, for some reason, some of them were posted there. You already did webinar 1, and then here's where I'm talking about the advantages and disadvantages of the multi-level class. So I would go ahead and click on it, and you could see there's a couple of people who are already starting the discussion. So a way to start the discussion is, and you would click right here where it says add a new discussion topic. And then here you will add your content. After you add your content, you would post it to the forum, and then it'll appear right here. So let me just do a sample one. So I'm going to name this one test. So this is, and then let's say that's my, I have about 5-6 sentences of so let's imagine I have a whole discussion post right there. And then I would just put here post to forum. Yes, Vicki?
Before you click post to forum. Oh, I was just going to say, oh, it did show up right away. Okay. Nope. We're good. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So you would go ahead and do that. So then you have the background reading A, which I was talking about. So you would click on it. Notice it's a PDF. So you would click on it. Depending on your computer, you might have to resize it a little bit. And I think what was mentioned earlier, the questions in blue, do we have to answer them? They're just the guiding questions. So yeah, it would be the guided questions for this reading activity. So it is a few pages. Okay, so you would do that. And then once you do that, you would go into the background reading A forum discussion. And then here again, so we see one person has already added a discussion. And then here you have the questions. So the questions would be, what resonated with you in background reading A material? What is something new that you might try in your multi-level class next week, or whenever you or maybe even tomorrow for some people you're teaching tomorrow. And then you have instructions for podcast 1 and 2. So on this one here, you will read the entire document here. It's 2 pages and it guides you step by step on how to go into the CalPro site, and then also how to access the podcast, so the audio. Okay, so you would go ahead and do that. And then the discussion for the podcast would be right here. And that would be it for week 1. Then on week 2, you would be, you will see week 2. So until you finish all the assignments of week 1, you will start seeing week 2. So that's why right now, if you see, there's really nothing there, because not until you finish everything, okay? Okay, so I think we are done, right, Vicky?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Francisco. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. I have put the webinar survey link in the chat. If everybody would be so kind as to complete that, we would very much appreciate it. And as we mentioned before, the webinar 2 poll will be closed on Friday, and the winning date and time will be posted in the announcements. It will take place sometime during week 3. So be on the lookout for that. And then just a reminder that this webinar was recorded, and the recording link will be posted in the webinar 1 makeup assignment by tomorrow afternoon. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to Francisco or me or Anna Schiff, who is the online course coordinator. Thank you, everyone, for joining this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you online.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.